My mother-in-law told my daughter's school she was abandoned, which brought Child Protective Services to my doorstep. So I brought a process server to her 40th anniversary party, and you could practically hear her blood pressure spike when she realized she was being sued for defamation. Her face went a shade of pale I'd never seen before, a color that wasn't quite white, more like spoiled cream. It started with a knock, not a friendly tap 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 from a neighbor, but a firm official rap on the door that vibrated through the floorboards. It was a sound that meant business, and my stomach immediately dropped. I was in the middle of making Lily, my 7-year-old, a grilled cheese sandwich for lunch. The smell of melting butter and toasting bread filled our small, sunny kitchen. It was a Saturday. Saturdays were supposed to be safe. I peered through the peephole and saw two people, a man and a woman, dressed in sober, professional clothes. They weren't selling anything. They weren't missionaries. My heart started hammering in my chest, a frantic bird trapped against my ribs. I opened the door a crack, keeping the chain on. "Can I help you?" I asked, my voice tight. The woman offered a thin, practiced smile that didn't reach her tired eyes. She held up an ID badge. "Ma'am, my name is Carol, and this is my colleague, David. We're with Child Protective Services. May we come in?" The world tilted. Child Protective Services. The words didn't make sense in my sun-drenched hallway. They belonged on television dramas, in whispered stories about other, less fortunate families. Not here, not for me and Lily. I fumbled with the chain, my hands shaking. I let them in, my mind racing through 1,000 possibilities. Had Lily said something at school? Did she have a bruise from falling off her bike that someone misinterpreted? My brain was a frantic Rolodex of every minor parenting misstep I'd ever made. Is everything all right?" I stammered, leading them into the living room. Lily poked her head out of the kitchen, her eyes wide with curiosity. "Lily, sweetie, can you go to your room and play for a little bit? Mommy has to talk to these people." Her lower lip trembled. She knew this was serious. She nodded silently and disappeared down the hall. The sound of her small feet on the hardwood was the only thing that felt real. Carol sat on the edge of my sofa, her posture rigid. "We received a report concerning your daughter, Lily," she began, her voice neutral, clinical. "The report alleges that she has been abandoned. Abandoned." The word hung in the air, ugly and absurd. I stared at her, certain I'd misheard. "Abandoned? What are you talking about? I'm right here. She's right here. I've never left her." David, the man, spoke for the first time. "The report came from her school. They were informed by a concerned family member that you had left the state and that your daughter was being left alone for extended periods." A family member. My blood ran cold. There was only one person who would do this. One person with that particular brand of venom, that insidious need to control and destroy. My husband's mother, Eleanor. The slow burn of injustice had been the background radiation of my marriage for nearly a decade. Eleanor had never wanted me for her son, Mark. I wasn't from the right family, didn't have the right pedigree. I was a disruption to her perfectly curated world. Mark was her golden child, the sun around which her entire universe orbited. His younger sister could do no wrong, but Mark was her masterpiece, and I was the smudge on the canvas. From the beginning, it was a war of 1,000 tiny cuts. When Mark and I were planning our wedding, she'd insisted on a specific venue, a country club her family had belonged to for generations. When I gently suggested we look at a place that was more us, a rustic barn with fairy lights, she'd smiled that tight, reptilian smile of hers and said, "Oh, that's cute, very simple, but Mark deserves a real wedding, don't you think?" Mark, of course, had folded instantly. "It's just easier, honey," he'd whispered to me later. "Let's just keep the peace." Keeping the peace became my full-time, unpaid job. It meant accepting her backhanded compliments about my cooking. It's amazing what you can do with store-bought ingredients. It meant smiling through her passive-aggressive remarks about my home. "Such a cozy little place. You must be so good at organizing." It meant letting her redecorate my living room in her mind every time she visited, pointing out all the furniture she would replace and the walls she would repaint. When Lily was born, the battlefield simply shifted. My parenting became her new favorite target. If I breastfed, I was being exhibitionist. If I used formula, I was denying my child essential nutrients. If I let Lily cry for a minute to learn self-soothing, I was neglectful. If I rushed to pick her up, I was spoiling her. Every choice I made was wrong. a fresh piece of evidence in the ongoing trial for my unsuitability as Mark's wife and Lily's mother. Mark's response was always the same, a weary sigh, a hand rubbing the back of his neck. "That's just Mom," he'd say. "She means well. She's from a different generation." He treated her cruelty like bad weather, an unavoidable force of nature you just had to endure. He never saw it as a choice she was making, a deliberate campaign of psychological warfare. He saw my reactions, my frustration, my hurt, my anger as the real problem. "Can't you just let it go? You're making things so tense." I learned to be small. I learned to swallow my words, to bite back the retorts that clawed at my throat. I became an expert in de-escalation, a diplomat in a war I never signed up for. Family dinners at her house were exercises in navigating landmines. Her home was immaculate, a museum of beige and cream where nothing was ever out of place. The air smelled of lemon cleaner and expensive hand soap. She would hold court at the head of the dining table, her fork like a scepter, directing the conversation, praising Mark's latest promotion, and subtly digging at my career as a freelance graphic designer. "It must be nice," she'd once said, loud enough for the whole table to hear, "to have a little hobby to keep you busy." The week before the CPS visit, the conflict had escalated. It was about summer camp. I had found a wonderful art camp for Lily, a place where she could paint and make pottery and be the creative, vibrant little soul she was. I'd paid the deposit myself. When Eleanor found out, she was furious. She had already decided, without consulting me, that Lily would be attending the same tennis camp she had sent Mark to 30 years ago. "She needs to build character," Eleanor had insisted over the phone, her voice sharp. "Not mess around with clay pigeons. It's pottery, Eleanor, and she loves art. She's 7. She doesn't know what she loves. She needs structure, discipline." "She's not going to the tennis camp," I said, my voice firmer than usual. My spine, which had been bent for so long, was starting to straighten. Protecting Lily was a powerful motivator. There was a cold silence on the other end of the line. "We'll see about that," she'd said, and hung up. Mark, predictably, had tried to broker a compromise. Maybe she could do 2 weeks of each. "No, Mark, this isn't a negotiation. This is my daughter. I'm her mother. I get to make this decision." He'd looked at me, his expression a mixture of surprise and annoyance. I wasn't following the script. I wasn't keeping the peace. And now, this, the ultimate escalation, a lie so monstrous, so dangerous, that it took my breath away. She hadn't just disagreed with my parenting, she had tried to have my child taken from me. Back in my living room, the CPS workers were watching me, their faces impassive. They were collecting evidence, gauging my reaction. I took a deep breath, forcing the rage down, replacing it with a cold, clear calm. This was not the time to be emotional. This was the time to be precise. "I did recently have a disagreement with my mother-in-law," I said, my voice steady. "Her name is Eleanor Vance. I believe she is the concerned family member you're referring to. I did not leave the state. As you can see, I am here. My daughter is here. We were just making lunch." Carol's eyes flickered. "We'll need to speak with Lily, and we'll need to look around the house." "Of course," I said. "Whatever you need." For the next hour, they turned my life inside out. They talked to Lily, asking her gentle questions about where Mommy was last night and the night before. They looked in my fridge, my pantry. They checked Lily's bedroom, her drawers, her closet. It was a violation of the deepest kind, a search for a rot that didn't exist. I stood by, my arms crossed, a silent statue of compliance. My humiliation was a physical weight. My home, my sanctuary, felt tainted. Finally, they seemed satisfied. "Everything appears to be in order," Carol said at the door. "But these reports have to be taken seriously. The case will remain open for a few weeks while we finalize our report. We may need to follow up." "I understand," I said. The moment the door closed behind them, I collapsed against it, my legs giving out. The cold resolve shattered, and a wave of pure, undiluted fury washed over me. This was it, the final straw. The peace I had worked so hard to keep was a fiction. There was no peace. There was only a bully who had finally gone too far and a husband who had let her. Waiting stopped being an option. Explaining, pleading, reasoning, all of it was useless. You can't reason with a hurricane. You can only build a seawall. My seawall would be made of lawyers and lawsuits. When Mark came home an hour later, I was sitting at the kitchen table, my laptop open. He walked in, whistling, and dropped his keys in the bowl by the door. "Hey, what's up? You're quiet." I looked up at him, my expression flat. "CPS was here." His smile vanished. What? Why? Your mother called the school. She told them I'd abandoned Lily. He stared at me, his mouth falling open. He ran a hand through his hair. Oh God! She wouldn't. There must be a misunderstanding. There is no misunderstanding, Mark. They were here. They questioned me. They questioned our daughter. They searched our house. Because your mother told a vicious, dangerous lie. He sank into a chair opposite me, his face pale. I'll call her. I'll sort this out. And that was the moment I knew. Not just that he didn't get it, but that he would never get it. His first instinct was still to manage his mother, to smooth things over, to put the cap back on the volcano. He didn't see that the volcano had already erupted and destroyed the village. No, I said. The word was quiet, but it had the density of a black hole. You will not be calling her. I will be handling this from now on. What are you talking about? I'm done, Mark. I'm done keeping your peace. It's costing me my own. And now it's threatening our daughter. This ends. Now. His jaw clenched. You're overreacting. She was probably just worried. She goes too far sometimes. You know that. I just looked at him. The chasm between us had been there for years, but now I could finally see it for what it was. It wasn't a crack. It was a canyon. And he was standing on the other side with his mother. The quiet resolve settled in my bones. The emotional storm had passed, leaving behind a landscape of crystalline clarity. My hurt transformed into fuel. My anger became a tool. I wasn't a victim anymore. I was a strategist. The first thing I did was call the school. I spoke to the principal, Mr. Harris. He was cagey at first, citing privacy policies. Mr. Harris, I said, my voice level and cold. A false report was made to you, which resulted in a traumatic investigation of my family by Child Protective Services. I am not asking for gossip. I am asking for the information I need to protect my child. Now, who made the report? There was a pause. I could hear him shuffling papers. He sighed. It was her grandmother, Eleanor Vance. She came in yesterday afternoon. She seemed very distraught. Distraught, I repeated. The word was a joke. Eleanor hadn't been distraught a day in her life. She was calculating. Did she provide any evidence for this claim? She said she hadn't been able to reach you for days, that your car was gone. Of course, I'd taken Lily to visit my sister for 2 days, midweek. A trip I had told Mark about, a trip he had apparently failed to mention to his mother. Or maybe he had, and it didn't matter. The truth was irrelevant to her. My absence was simply an opportunity. Do you have security cameras at the school's entrance? I asked. Yes, of course. I'm going to need a copy of the footage from when she arrived and when she left. My lawyer will be in touch with a formal request. The word lawyer worked like a magic spell. Mr. Harris's tone changed instantly. The bureaucratic walls came down. Funny what urgency does when it's tied to the threat of legal action. Of course, Mrs. Vance. We'll cooperate fully. Next, I researched family law attorneys. I wasn't looking for a mediator. I was looking for a shark. I found one in a woman named Jessica Albright. Her website was sleek and professional, filled with testimonials from clients praising her tenacity. Her motto was printed in bold, "Ink beats opinions." I liked that. I booked a consultation for the following Monday. Mark was furious. A lawyer! Are you serious? You're going to sue my mother! You're tearing this family apart! She tore it apart, I replied, not even looking up from my laptop. She used a state agency to harass me and terrorize our child. This is not a family squabble anymore. This is a legal matter. He paced the room, his face flushed. Think about what this will do. The gossip, my parents' reputation. She should have thought about her reputation before she tried to have my daughter taken away from me, I said. You don't need armor when you're dealing with family, Mark. You need boundaries. And when boundaries are repeatedly ignored, you need legal fences. The meeting with Jessica Albright was like a breath of fresh air. She was sharp, no nonsense, with eyes that seemed to see right through to the heart of the matter. I laid out the whole story, the years of subtle digs, the escalating conflict, and the final unforgivable act. I didn't cry. I presented the facts like a report. She listened patiently, taking notes. When I was finished, she leaned back in her leather chair. This is textbook, she said. What your mother-in-law did is called defamation per se. Accusing someone of a crime, which child abandonment is one of the categories that doesn't require you to prove damages. The damage is assumed. It's also intentional infliction of emotional distress. For the first time in days, I felt a weight leaving my body. It wasn't just in my head. It wasn't an overreaction. It was real. It had a name. So, what can we do? I asked. We sue, she said simply. We file a civil suit for defamation and emotional distress. We'll subpoena the school's records, the security footage, and the CPS report. We'll depose your mother in law. We will make her actions so public and so costly that she will never, ever consider doing something like this again. The plan was beautiful in its simplicity. It wasn't about revenge, it was about consequences. For years, Eleanor had operated in a world without them. Protected by Mark's weakness and my desire for peace, I was about to introduce her to the concept. Jessica's team moved quickly. They got the CPS report, which named Eleanor as the sole source. They got a sworn affidavit from Mr. Harris. They got the security footage. It showed Eleanor marching into the school, dabbing at her dry eyes with a tissue, and then leaving 20 minutes later, getting into her pristine Lexus, and driving away. Her performance was flawless. We had everything we needed. The only question was when to strike. Her 40th wedding anniversary party is in 3 weeks, I told Jessica. It's a huge affair, catered at the country club. Everyone they know will be there. A slow smile spread across Jessica's face. That's perfect, she said. A public stage for a public reckoning. The next 3 weeks were a strange sort of limbo. Mark and I were living in the same house, but we were miles apart. He alternated between angry outbursts and pathetic pleas for me to reconsider. Mom is a wreck, he'd say. She knows she went too far. She wants to apologize. I'm not interested in her apology, I'd reply. I'm interested in a guarantee. An apology she gives you in private is worthless. It's just a tactic to get me to back down. Eleanor, for her part, tried to launch a charm offensive. She sent flowers. They went straight into the trash. She sent a gift for Lily, an enormous, obscenely expensive dollhouse. I donated it to a children's hospital. She called, leaving tearful, manipulative voicemails. I was just so worried about my grandbaby, she'd sob. My love for her made me crazy. I saved the voicemails as further evidence of her attempt to create a false narrative. The day of the party arrived. It was a perfect sunny day in late June. Mark put on his best suit, his face a mask of strained optimism. He still believed, right up to the very end, that I would show up, smile, and pretend none of this ever happened. That I would choose his comfort over my own dignity one last time. Are you and Lily coming? He asked, adjusting his tie in the mirror. Oh yes, I said, my voice sweet. We wouldn't miss it for the world. I dressed Lily in a beautiful yellow sundress. I put on a simple, elegant navy blue dress, a piece of armor I'd been saving for a special occasion. I did my makeup with surgical precision. When I was done, I didn't look like a victim. I looked like a woman who was in control. We drove to the country club in separate cars. I had coordinated everything with Jessica. The process server, a discreet man named Paul, would be arriving at exactly 7:15, right after the main toasts. Walking into that party was like walking into the lion's den. The room was filled with Mark's extended family, Eleanor's friends, a whole army of flying monkeys who had undoubtedly been fed a steady diet of her curated version of events. The air was thick with forced smiles and judgmental whispers. I could feel their eyes on me. I held Lily's hand, my grip firm and reassuring. Eleanor spotted us from across the room. Her face flooded with relief and triumph. See, her expression said. She came crawling back. She glided towards us, her husband, Frank, trailing in her wake like a pilot fish. Darling, she cooed, reaching for me. I took a small step back, just enough to avoid her embrace. Her smile flickered. I'm so glad you came. We were so worried. Were you? I asked, my voice devoid of emotion. Frank, my father-in-law, a man whose spine had been surgically removed decades ago, wrung his hands. Now, let's let bygones be bygones. It's a party. Mark rushed over, eager to play the role of peacemaker. Mom, Dad, isn't this great? We're all here, a family. I gave him a look that could freeze fire. He flinched. We endured the next hour. I made small talk. I accepted a glass of champagne and didn't drink it. I watched the clock. At 7 o'clock, Frank stood up to give a gushing, syrupy toast to his wife of 40 years, the rock of their family. People applauded. Eleanor beamed, soaking in the adoration. At 7:14, I saw him. Paul, the process server, entered the room. He was dressed like a guest, a nondescript man in a gray suit. He scanned the crowd, his eyes briefly meeting mine. I gave a tiny, almost imperceptible nod towards the head table where Eleanor was holding court. He moved through the room with quiet efficiency. He approached the table just as Eleanor was laughing at something one of her friends had said. "Eleanor Vance?" he asked politely. She looked up, annoyed at the interruption. "Yes?" "You've been served," he said, placing a thick manila envelope on the table in front of her. He turned and walked away before she could even process what was happening. A hush fell over the immediate area. The silence spread through the room like a ripple in a pond. Everyone turned to look. Eleanor stared at the envelope as if it were a snake. "What is this?" she said, her voice a little shaky. She picked it up, her perfectly manicured nails fumbling with the clasp. She pulled out the papers. I watched her face. It was a masterclass in emotional collapse, happening in real time. First, smug dismissal. Then, confusion as she read the first page, her brow furrowing. Her eyes scanned the legal jargon, picking out words: defamation, damages, intentional infliction of emotional distress. And then it happened. The pale face moment. The blood drained from her face, leaving behind that sickly, spoiled cream pallor. Her mouth fell open, her hand, the one holding the papers, began to tremble. A sharp, ugly clink sounded as her wine glass, knocked by her shaking arm, tipped over, spilling red wine across the pristine white tablecloth like a spreading wound. Frank grabbed the papers from her. "What in God's name?" His own face went slack with shock as he read. Mark rushed to the table. "Mom, what is it? What's going on?" Eleanor looked up, her eyes finally finding mine across the room. They were filled with a mixture of disbelief and pure, unadulterated hatred. The mask was gone. I was finally seeing the real person underneath. "You," she whispered, the word barely audible. But in the dead silence of the room, it carried. "You did this!" Her voice rose, becoming shrill, hysterical. "She's suing us! At our anniversary party! Can you believe the nerve?" Now came the frantic denial. "It was a mistake. I was worried. I was just trying to protect my granddaughter," she shrieked, appealing to the crowd of onlookers. The guilt trip was next, right on schedule. "You're ruining our special day. After everything we've done for you, we're family." I walked slowly towards the table, my heels clicking on the polished floor. I stopped a few feet away. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. "You called my daughter's school and told them she was abandoned," I said, my voice clear and steady. "You weaponized a government agency to harass me. That isn't what family does. Family doesn't try to take your children away because they're angry about summer camp." A collective gasp went through the room. The flying monkeys were finally hearing the other side of the story, and it was a bombshell. Mark turned on me, his face contorted with rage and shame. "How could you? Here? Tonight?" "This is where she chose to build her reputation," I said calmly. "It seems like the perfect place to start dismantling it with the truth. You've been served, Eleanor. There are consequences for your actions. I'll see you in court." I turned, took Lily's hand, and walked out of that room. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I could feel the smoldering ruins of Eleanor's perfect world behind me. The aftermath was as messy and ugly as you'd expect. The party ended abruptly. The story ripped through their social circle. Eleanor's reputation was shattered. People she'd known for decades looked at her differently. The woman who presented herself as the perfect matriarch had been exposed as something cruel and vindictive. The lawsuit proceeded. Their first move was to hire an expensive lawyer who tried to have the case dismissed as a frivolous family dispute. The judge, after reviewing the evidence Jessica presented, the CPS report, the school's affidavit, the security footage, denied their motion in about 5 minutes. The deposition was the best part. I wasn't there, but Jessica gave me the transcript. Under oath, Eleanor's story fell apart. Her carefully constructed narrative of a concerned grandmother crumbled under Jessica's relentless, factual questioning. She contradicted herself. She lied, was caught in the lie, and then tried to lie her way out of it. By the end, she was a sputtering, incoherent mess. It was all there, in black and white. They settled out of court a week later. Their lawyer knew they would be crucified by a jury. The settlement was substantial. It included a formal, written apology, which their lawyer fought tooth and nail. But Jessica wouldn't budge. More importantly, it included a large sum of money that went directly into a legally binding trust for Lily, a trust that I controlled and which Eleanor and Mark could never touch. The final term of the settlement was a restraining order. Eleanor was not to come within 500 feet of me, Lily, or Lily's school. The ink on that document was the sweetest victory I have ever known. It wasn't about the money, it was about the verdict. It was the official, legally recognized truth. I hadn't been overreacting. I hadn't been too sensitive. I had been wronged. My marriage to Mark did not survive. He could never quite forgive me for refusing to continue playing my part in his family's dysfunctional play. He saw my lawsuit not as an act of protection, but as an act of aggression. You humiliated her, he said, as if her humiliation wasn't a direct consequence of her own actions. He couldn't or wouldn't make the break. He was too enmeshed, too conditioned to see her as the eternal victim. We separated, and the divorce was quiet and swift. He moved back in with his parents. I can't decide if that's tragic or just pathetic. Lily and I moved. We got a small apartment in a different town, a place with no history, no ghosts. It has a little balcony where we grow tomatoes. The walls are painted a cheerful blue that Eleanor would have hated. It's our sanctuary. Life became quiet. The constant tension that had been a knot in my shoulders for a decade slowly began to unwind. I no longer dreaded the sound of the phone ringing. Holidays are now small, peaceful affairs with my own family, people who love me without condition. Lily is thriving. The change in her has been remarkable. Without the oppressive weight of her grandmother's judgment and the constant stress in her home, she has blossomed. She is more confident, more joyful. She goes to her art camp every summer and fills our apartment with lopsided pottery and brilliant, messy paintings. Sometimes I think about Eleanor. I don't feel anger anymore or even resentment. I just feel a profound sense of pity. Her need for control was so absolute that she was willing to burn down everything, including her own relationship with her son and granddaughter, just to feel powerful. In the end, her actions left her with nothing but a ruined reputation and a court order to stay away. I didn't destroy a family. I saved my part of it. I built a wall, not of anger, but of consequences. And behind that wall, my daughter and I found peace. Our life isn't dramatic or exciting. It's boring in the best possible way. It's just grilled cheese sandwiches on a sunny Saturday with no unexpected knocks on the door. It's safe. It's ours. So, what do you think? Was suing my mother-in-law for defamation and serving her at her own anniversary party taking it too far? Or was it the only language she would understand? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more.